You're listening to Beyond Wellness Radio, bringing you the cutting edge in health, biohacking, and sports performance. Stay up to date and listen anywhere and anytime on your computer, tablet, or smartphone by subscribing on iTunes. Catch your host, Dr. Justin Marchegiani, as he answers your burning health questions as well as interviews from world-renowned guest experts. For more Beyond Wellness Radio, go to beyondwellnessradio.com.
Hey there, it's Dr. Justin Marchegiani. Welcome to Beyond Wellness Radio. Feel free and head over to beyondwellnessradio.com where you can access our full podcast transcriptions. While you're there, you can also sign up for our thyroid and female hormone video series. This series goes into the root cause of why your hormones are out of balance. While you're there, you can also schedule a functional medicine consult with Dr. Justin, myself, where we'll dig deeper into the root cause of your health challenges. Feel free and think of sharing this podcast with at least one person. This podcast grows by people sharing it. Sharing is caring. If you can think of one person that can benefit from this information, please feel free and share it. If you're enjoying the podcast, make sure you subscribe on iTunes. You can also click below the video or podcast where you'll see the iTunes review button and leave us a review. You can also sign up for the newsletter at beyondwellnessradio.com where you'll get updates before anyone else. Thank you so much and enjoy the show. Hey there, it's Dr. Justin Marchegiani. We got a great podcast here today. We have Brian Timmons here, who is the founder of BioHealth Labs with his father, Dr. William Timmons, Bill Timmons, the late great Bill Timmons here. And Bill wrote the book, The Chronic Stress Crisis, many years back. And he was a mentor of my good friend, Dr. Dan Kalish, and I've learned so much from Bill over the years, even though he's passed almost 10 years. Is that correct, Brian?
That's right, 10 years ago.
And he's helped so many physicians kind of mold their way of treatment and care for patients and really, changed and molded the whole way functional medicine is today. And we have this lab that's left over that's a great treatment modality and tool to assess stress and gut function. And I'm really excited to talk more about that with you, Brian.
Well, thanks for having me, Justin. You're a very, valued client and friend of ours, and I was just, talking to you recently about how I first learned about SIBO from you.
Oh, that's great.
You were first looking into SIBO testing, SIBO breath testing. I was online, and it was your video that I watched about 5 times, taking notes to wrap my head around it. So it's a pleasure to be with you.
Well, it's great to be here, and I do appreciate your guys' new test that's out, the 3-hour test with the lactulose, and also we'll be talking about some of the newer technology that you guys have with the glucose testing, which is great because that gives us a window more into the upper intestinal tract, where the lactulose gives us a window into the middle to lower part. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. With the glucose, because it's absorbed faster, you are getting upper, and you're also, and which is believed to be a bit more specific to the bacteria that are putting these gases out. Whereas with the lactulose, we're getting the distal end of the colon where the bacteria are more common. So, best case scenario, you actually do both. And when we release the glucose here in the next few weeks, we are going to offer a combo in which you can get both. Granted, it requires some commitment. You need to plan a few days there where you're going to be on a strict diet. But what better way than to look for SIBO than to do both tests? And we're going to make sure there's a nice discount associated with patients that are getting both tests.
That's great. And regarding the SIBO test, you typically have patients go on a lower FODMAP diet ahead of time. There's certain foods you're telling them to avoid or to eat.
Yeah, specifically, the 24-hour preparation limits the diet significantly. Mm-hmm. To some proteins, white rice. I mean, it's very, very limited, which for some people, will not be a big deal. But I think for the average person, it's going to be a bit of a planning stage. And, my advice, and I'm sure it's yours as well, is for a patient who doesn't necessarily have a nicely controlled diet, not to try and do this overnight and treat it as like a stressful event, but to ramp up to it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Start removing some things from the diet, maybe even 3 or 4 days prior. But when you get to that 24-hour preparation period, it's just got to be based on the instructions.
And typically when I look at the SIBO testing as well, I'm always looking at parasites and gut infections as well, because some people, like you mentioned earlier with the H. pylori, we'll always run the 401H or an equivalent test to make sure there are no other lingering infections like an H. pylori or a parasite infection like blasto or crypto or giardia, because some of those infections, you may have collateral damage in and around the parasites, and you have all this bacteria spewing off hydrogen and methane, and you may have a false positive or, positive for SIBO, but it may be from a deeper infection upstream. What's your take on the 401H and kind of combining some of the deeper parasite stuff with the SIBO?
Combining is always great. I mean, as someone who's dealt with ulcerative colitis for almost 20 years, I will prioritize my resources to diagnose what's going on between the mouth and the bottom end.
Yeah,
totally. It's what could be more important from a health perspective than just that. Unless you have other known issues, of course, but we know that most health problems originate in the gut. So to have the gut as clean as possible, I think, is a huge priority. I recommend that as resources are available, I think doing the pathogen screening, doing the GI screening, with BioHealth Lab and also with other labs. I just think it's that important. And the thing too, being in this business, I do understand that there's no one answer when it comes to gut testing. I mean, some labs will market themselves as having the answer, but I have found with my own challenges that I was best served by doing as many tests as I could afford, and to get at something. And some of the gastroenterologists I was working with had the same attitude. They said, well, we don't have one lab we use. We're going to try a few different tests because inevitably labs will miss things. Or in the case of, for example, some of the PCR testing, the sensitivity is so extreme that we're picking up things that aren't even a problem. So it's like putting together a puzzle, and I think it correlates to the severity of your health concerns.
And I know you guys have used the stool antigen testing for many years, and I've always said you guys have probably the best H. pylori stool antigen out there. I mean, I've tested it up against many tests side by side. It picks it up where others don't. So that's always great to have that. What's your take on the PCR or the DNA-based polymerase chain reaction test? I'll run some of them side by side with the 401H from your lab there, but what's your take on it?
Well, I believe it has enormous promise. Mm-hmm. And we want technology and medicine, healthcare, to be joined at the hip. What I'm always shy about, though, is the shiny new toy. And we see a lot of clinicians rushing headlong into things that are new and unique without really understanding them or appreciating what the real science is behind it. Because to appreciate lab science, you need to sort of commit yourself to a learning process that most people aren't willing to do. I believe there is value to the PCR testing. Now, I can't speak to one lab being better than another. We've certainly looked into things ourselves.
Are you exploring at all doing PCR?
Well, we do have a couple of labs close to ours that are not competitors that do a lot of R&D. And what we're doing is we're patiently waiting for a couple thumbs up from some scientists that we work with who have been looking at these tests, don't like the current technology setup for one reason or another, and we're waiting for things to be a little more refined and to do their own validations in-house where they can truly correlate not just acutely healthy patients, but these subclinical cases that a lot of us are looking at. I mean, it's one thing to have Clostridium difficile and be in urgent care, and it's another thing to have chronic stress problems and what's driving them. So if you want to look at the gut, I'll tell you what, a lot of it has to do with the clinician's ability to understand the lab's technology and science and marry it to their own understanding of how the results are going to affect their decisions.
Got it.
That's why we're such strong supporters of our methods, which, now granted, we're not in the dark ages by any means. We have some very sophisticated gear, especially where our cultures are concerned and our ability to do light targeting on organisms, get very careful speciation. We also, I can tell you, we pick up more candida than any other lab based on feedback I've been getting. And that a lot of it has to do with the fact that we still believe that people have a value in the microbiology department. And
Absolutely.
we have a lot of overhead on staff, highly qualified staff, including a public health microbiologist we've had now for a couple of years who's amazing. There is a passionate commitment to finding things in our lab, as opposed to just flipping the switch on an instrument and assuming that everything's going to turn out great.
And yeah, go ahead.
You know, I mean, just to kind of go on like the 30-second biohealth commercial, you know, like one of the things that makes us different is we really do believe in hiring passionate people who really care about, you know, on Friday evening going home and realizing that they made a difference that week. And if they don't feel that way, we don't hire them or we don't keep them.
Makes
and
sense.
That extends to all departments, including microbiology. That's not to say that scientific procedures shouldn't be the heart and soul of a lab, but having both is a pretty powerful synergy.
Yeah, I was able to get on the horn with a couple of your microbiologists and parasitologists last year when I had a couple of clinical questions, and I agree they've always been the best, so I appreciate that.
Great.
And coming from your perspective, it's interesting, right? Because your dad was this, you know, big naturopath physician who was in the trenches working with patients. And I don't think you have a clinician background, so it's interesting how you guys came together. You created this lab that some of the salivary stress hormone technology, which 20 years ago was relatively new, it was just you and diagnostics, which is interesting. But it's did you guys create biohealth out of the necessity to have tools to help quantify and diagnose and help treat these patients? How did this all come to fruition?
Well, as you mentioned, my dad, Dr. William Timmons, was a naturopathic doctor, and you know, the book, which is available for free download, by the way, on biohealthlab.com.
Great.
It really tells the whole story,
including
the first chapter, which is his story. In the interest of time, I'm trying to really, you know, condense this. But this is a guy who had pretty much retired by 40 because of his success in real estate. He was a master black belt, recognized in some countries as what's called an assassin because his training was done at such a high level.
That's crazy.
So picture this man with extraordinary physical health, just a beast. Sweetest guy in the world, too, for those who knew him. You know, just a really sweet guy, but very tough. Very well off financially. He bought 30 acres in the mountains in Oregon, set up a studio to teach martial arts to the people in the area, and you know, he was remarried at the time and had a couple of kids from her. Fast forward a year later, divorced, 160 pounds. Couldn't live anywhere because he would have terrible symptoms, rashes, headaches, just a mess. And he ended up going to Henrotin Hospital in Chicago, where they put him into an environmental sensitivity unit. And that's where they determined that he had environmental illness.
Right.
Yeah, multiple chemical sensitivities. I mean, everything. He couldn't even get close to like a ghetto blaster, you know, like the old stereos with the battery operated things, without feeling himself get weak.
Wow.
So he ended up going out to the desert in Southern California and living in a special community where he started researching and building himself back up through diet and titrating foods and this whole thing. And then it was a brilliant man, Bill Kellis, who operated a clinic in San Diego, who put the pieces together and said, Bill, you know, here's what you got, and this is what we've got to do. And they built him back up, kind of like the $6 million man. And rather than go back to real estate or whatever, my dad's like, yeah, I got a lot of people to help. You know, that was his spirit.
Totally.
And so he became a naturopathic doctor, opened up a clinic, and became legendary for helping people that had to drag themselves through the door and had been there, done that with every clinic, and, you know, traveled the world, gone to Costa Rica to the forbidden, you know, whatever. He would get everybody that was, he had stage 4 cancer cases, you know, people with giant tumors who 2 years later were personal trainers and, you know, dynamic, living a joyful, successful life. So how does this all come forward? not as condensed as I had hoped. I was doing software development in Northern California in 1999 during the dot-com boom. And while I was certainly enjoying myself, and even to this day, I still, I love coding, and I think it's a beautiful thing. It was unsatisfying from the perspective of sitting in a chair all day and having intense work schedules and deadlines that were just, excruciating. The timing was right. My dad said, "How would you," and my wife Alicia actually, "how would you guys like to move back down to San Diego and work with us on this?" And so my dad and his wife Joan, the four of us with a couple assistants, we started doing this thing, and we started by brokering labs. So we went to Metametrics, which was around at the time, Diagnostics, other labs, and Institute of Parasitic Diseases, and we put all these kits together and made training programs for doctors. And at that time, it was called Functional Medicine Center. Well, this became successful. 1999, we decided we need to have our own lab and our own dietary supplement company. And so BioHealth Lab and Biomatrix were born.
That's great. And it's amazing that I never had a chance to meet your dad, but he's had such an impact on me. And I've helped thousands of patients. I know many of my colleagues he's had an impact on. So it's crazy that you may not even meet someone, but still be touched by what they've done here. So that's great. It's a great legacy to pass. So I appreciate that, Brian.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you.
Well, let's kind of switch gears here. You guys have come up with some newer technology, and it's really cool because it relates to a lot of the stress physiology that most people experience, that fight or flight people are in daily with this adrenal stress from foods, from infections, from lifestyle and emotional stressors, and that's the new adrenal testing. And one thing that you guys have looked at is the cortisol awakening response, which is basically looking at cortisol, your stress response when you wake up, and then looking at it, remember correctly, 1 hour later, and really looking for that 50% jump in cortisol, and that gives us a big window into our HPA axis, which is the brain, the hypothalamus and the pituitary, talking to the adrenals. Can you talk a little bit more about the cortisol awakening response, Brian?
Yeah. So just a quick backstory is warranted. Since 1999, we've been doing the cortisol measurements. 4 cortisols at certain time frames during the day, doing DHEA sulfate as the most basic stress assessment, to assess how the body is responding to stress and give us some clues into what the drivers of stress might be, and as a monitoring tool for lifestyle changes, therapies, and so on. About a year and a half ago, we were challenged by one of our colleagues who had been doing a lot of research, is Dr. Tom Williams.
Yeah.
And Tom called me and said, I want to give you a heads up. I'm working on this book, and bottom line, it doesn't seem like any of you labs know what you're doing, because the science doesn't support the collection times, the units of measurement, the precautions, the idea of adrenal fatigue. So he came at me with all this information that I'd kind of been loosely aware of, but you get busy, you get complacent, the tests are helping people, it's not broken, don't fix it. But he challenged us to upgrade across the board, and he really challenged all the labs. And we took the challenge. We felt it was just that important and exciting, frankly, to make these changes. And, besides taking a second look at our nomenclature and the way we talk about the test, the idea of are there really 3 stages? Is there really a reserve of pregnenolone that can be stolen in favor of cortisol? There were all these things that we'd all believed in that suddenly became questionable. So, but more like rubber meets the road, where the clinician and the patient are concerned, evaluating the HPA axis, we realized that bottom line, Justin, science. Like, as a lab, we have to have a kit, instructions, a return shipping temperature control. We need to have reports with details that are all rooted in science, where you can go on PubMed and see support for that. And so that's why we went away from our menu of adrenal stress testing, which was based on ideas we'd had for many years, which were good. Don't get me wrong. And I know you had your own experience with those tests, and their value. But we saw this as an opportunity to leap forward and get more precise and really refine what we're doing. So again, an example for patients watching this who are doing these tests, it's very important that the first sample be done 30 minutes after waking. Why? Science. We know that that's the peak of cortisol production over a 24-hour period.
That first 30 minutes.
Actually at the 30-minute mark. So the patient wakes, sets a timer at 30 minutes. We're going to get a consistent number that's representative of the peak of cortisol. So that DHEA sulfate and the units we use for that, a lot of these nuances, and also the way the instructions are written, the advice on how to accumulate the saliva in your mouth that won't interfere with the test. We took a look at a lot of details, made sure they're reflected in our instructions, which are very attractive, very friendly. We have very sophisticated packing materials because you don't want to leave certain analytes at room temperature, ambient temperature, vulnerable to heat and temperature swings. So we've done all this to improve the quality and the scientific integrity of what we do. But cortisol awakening response is really the big deal here. And the reason is, the way I like to think of cortisol awakening, well, first let's define what it is. But right before we wake up, we have what's called the, I may mispronounce it, I think it's the suprachiasmatic nucleus.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, it's a part of the brain that's like warming up the car. It's like the first crank of the key to start the engine. That's it. It's getting ready because the brain is getting ready for the day. And if you take life and you break it down, what is it? It's one day at a time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Almost said the most stressful event. I would hope it's not, but the first stressful event you have in your day is waking.
Yeah, absolutely.
Waking is a stressor, bottom line. So measuring the dynamic of how waking affects the HPA axis, or I should say how the HPA axis responds to waking, and the challenge of the day ahead is an amazing tool to look at how resilient and strong the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis is. There's been all this concentration. I understand why. People want to keep it simple and get through the day. But it's not about adrenal. The adrenals are an important part. They produce hormones in response to signals from the brain. But with the cortisol awakening response, you have a natural rise and fall of cortisol. And the way to measure this empirically is to have the patient collect a small, tiny amount of saliva within 5 minutes of waking, and then set the alarm, unless they're a great clock watcher, they watch the clock. 30 minutes later, they do the second sample. And then another 30 minutes later, 60 minutes after waking, you do the third sample.
So we get basically at 0, 30, and then 60. So three samples in that first hour. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Good.
And so what we do is we report that curve reflected against what we know from the literature would be the healthy curve to have. So instead of a single cortisol, which just tells us about production, the amount, this is like a movie compared to a photograph. We're getting a dynamic picture here. We're doing a mini stress test, really.
And what should we be seeing there? So if we're at baseline here, is it a 50% bump at 0 to 30? Is that where we're looking?
The range is around 50 to 70%. I may be off a skosh. And again, the literature is guiding this. The studies are going to take a while to have the healthy, inclusive, populations and kind of do it ourselves. But the 60 minutes should come down to less than 30, about 35% of the morning. So you want to see it go up to roughly 50%, and you want to see it come down not to the morning level necessarily, which is very rare to see in the literature, but around 20 to 30% above that morning level.
So let me give the listeners an example here. So let's say we're pumping out about 10 units of cortisol at 0 minutes, at waking. So then we should be at about 15 in about 30 minutes and maybe back down to 12 at 60 minutes. Is that a good example?
It is. What that would demonstrate is that under that stressful event of waking, we have a nice rise. Okay, I'm ready to start the day. Everything's turning on. That's that peak. Everything's turning on and getting ready. Now, if that 60 only drops like 5%, well, that's an example of a hyperactive HPA response. Like, you're not able to chill out. You're having a trouble getting down and calming down from a basic chemical level. And so that's exciting to understand why. Another example would be you go from that 0 measurement and it barely goes up. Let's say it only goes up 20, 30%. Well, that's a sign of somebody who's probably in burnout and has chronic health issues and perhaps a great deal of mental emotional stress. And that's a perfect opportunity for me to mention something else that makes our test very unique. We're not just showing you the 0 measure, the 30-minute measure, and the 60 against guidelines that can be used to help with the interpretation of the patient has an exaggerated HPA response, a dull, depressed HPA response. We also have a survey, and I just happen to have one here because I'm doing the test myself. I like to do our tests on a regular basis for a variety of reasons. But we have this survey. What it is, it's the perceived stress survey. There's a psychologist by the name of Cohen who put out what is one of the most well-established subjective questionnaires in all of psychology and psychiatry. It's a 10-question survey that asks you, during the last month, how often have you felt that things were going your way? How often have you felt you're on top of things? How often have you felt nervous? Difficulties piling up so high you couldn't overcome? And then it's rated from 0 to 4. Now, the total score fits into a 3-tiered scale. On the low end, you're someone who seems to be pretty on top of their stress, pretty mellow. You recognize that life can be hard, but you're not going to get all twisted about it. You've got people sort of in the middle, kind of could go either way. And then you have what we're seeing as should it surprise any of us that most of the questionnaires we're getting, people feel very stressed out and out of control. They're coming to us for help for these things. And, the high perceived stress score correlates very well with cortisol awakening response results. So when we see somebody, for example, with that exaggerated cortisol awakening response, it's like, a really high escalation, like, oh boy, I got to deal with the day. It's so stressful. I've got my boss, I've got my divorce, I've got my taxes, I've got this, I've got that. I'm going to stop right there and just get to something that I have personally picked up on is so key to all of this. And I know you've heard me talk about this before, and I've heard myself talk about this before because I seem to be talking about it every day with doctors. I feel like doctors and patients alike are looking for, is it a parasite that's making this happen? Or is it heavy metal toxicity that's causing this problem? Is it my diet? More than anything, it's our mental, emotional condition that's driving all of our health issues. We talked in a previous conversation about how a dear friend of ours, it was discovered that he had cancer when there was some surgery going on, and if he'd never been told, he'd still be here today.
Yep.
Instead, he lasted 3 months. It's this mind-body connection. So what's amazing about the test we're doing with cortisol awakening response and the perceived stress score is a patient can look at this on paper and say, that's me. I'm not handling my stress well. I've got these problems, whether they're with work, family, I mean, those tend to be the top two, right? Or another, for me, one of my favorite examples is the road rage mentality.
Yeah.
Now, I live in a rural area, very, very peaceful area where when people complain about the traffic, I just shake my head. Like, you had to wait 30 seconds for the light to change. Okay.
Yeah.
But even in a place like this, where compared to, say, a big metropolitan area, you'd think there would be no complaints, you will have road rage over somebody, my favorite example is being cut off.
Oh, yeah.
If I get cut off, I just back off a little bit, create some space, keep listening to my music, talk a little bit with my kids if they're in the back seat. I mean, really, why even let your heartbeat shift? That it's an attitude. It's an attitude. And I really believe that that's just one of many examples I could provide of how our mind, our mental state, our ability to deal with stress, to deal with it coming, to deal with it happening, to deal with it behind us. I feel like that is the undercurrent that really feeds every mechanism of health and homeostasis.
And I think a lot of the testing that's being done here, we're really getting a window into our parasympathetic and our sympathetic nervous system. So we have about 20 milliseconds for our frontal cortex to override that road rage, reaction to go chase that person down or whatever, right? And the more we have that parasympathetic system that's strong, we can override that sympathetic response. So the sympathetic response, in the example you gave where it's too high, for instance, where you get that cortisol awakening response that pops up and stays up, that's like you're driving a standard, but it can only go one way. It only can go first to second, second to third, third to fourth, fourth to fifth, but you can't downshift. So now you're stuck in that high gear and you can't wind down, you can't relax, you can't turn off. And then the opposite, when you're stuck in first gear and you can't go from second to third to fourth, you can't generate the energy. So with the testing, it's kind of like driving that car, right? You either can get up to max speed and deal with stress, but you can't wind down, or you can't get up and deal with stress anyway. So I think some of the testing is great because it gives you a window into that. And then from there, you can work with your clinician and say, hey, what are the things that we can do to help improve that parasympathetic response or dampen that sympathetic response? Now, I want to hear some of the things that you guys recommend at the lab and what you're seeing clinicians doing that's really helping with that. Let's give two examples: the cortisol awakening response that goes high and stays high, and the one that just can't get it up.
Right. So in the first case, you have what's called an elevated CAR, aggravated hyperactive HPA axis. Again, starting with the mental emotional is so critical. I know it's one of the hardest areas, not just it really is a very hard area for people in general, because it really means facing your own stuff in a pretty honest way, which, a lot of us don't want to do. And I know for clinicians, it's hard because they're not necessarily trained in psychology,
totally,
or with spiritual counseling or anything of that nature. But I would say that is extremely critical. I do know providers that have extensive questionnaires and inquiry process with their patients to understand what's going on in their lives. Are they caregivers? Do they have really difficult jobs? Do they have they lost someone recently very close to them? How are they dealing with that? That's fundamental. Besides the mental emotional side of that, and which of course you want to get tangible. As much as someone may prescribe, Prilosec for a certain condition, we need to prescribe relaxation for patients that are stressed out. It's so basic and fundamental that it's often overlooked, and even I think to some extent disregarded, like not really taken seriously. Oh, well, Mrs. Johnson, you should meditate 30 minutes a day. Well, you should. It's mind-blowing. If anyone's ever committed to a series of meditation, you never want to go back to not meditating.
Totally.
There's so many practices that can help, as you said, to manage the nervous system, which is the fundamental warehouse for every other health process we have. Now, besides that, certainly changes in diet, That's a very personal thing to different people and clinicians, so I can't really cite examples. There's so much disagreement over what's what.
Totally.
The sleep factor is an amazingly important thing. In fact, it seems like we know a couple of researchers in this trade, and they feel like sleep is the next like boom. It's something we do, for a third of our lives, pretty much, but people don't really think about it. I mean, a great example here, the room I'm in right now is beautifully lit by natural light and so forth. But at night, it's black.
Yeah.
It is as black gets. And I have a Verilux blue lamp that I turn on if I need to get up because I don't want to be shocked. That kind of thing's really critical too. Getting into sleep, because if you can optimize sleep, you optimize everything.
Totally.
Change your sleep, change your life. I mean, really, it's so true. And there's so much work that can be done on sleep. And of course, as you know, some of our panels offer melatonin, which is a great indicator of how well you're shutting down at night. Night stimulation, like I struggle with my daughters to get them to get off the screens at a certain hour.
Totally.
They don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear dad talk about HPA axis. They just want to finish their game or FaceTime with their friend. But I try to explain to them that you're not really sleeping when you overstimulate yourself like that. You're not getting the rest and repair.
Or at least get some of those blue blocking sunglasses on that will help at least block some of that blue light.
Absolutely, yeah. That's a great invention, and really that's just another cornerstone of this advice. And then of course, what's the other pillar of lifestyle? Exercise. And I think again that's another very personal thing. I've seen things lately online that just cracked me up, like people arguing over the health effects of rebounders. Some people claiming it's bad for you or doesn't do anything or doesn't raise the heart rate. Others claiming it cured their cancer. I mean, we just have to get real with ourselves and figure out what works for us, balance it, not spend 10 hours a week researching, listening to talking heads and bloggers, no offense. But there's got to be an
application. Do it.
Yeah, exactly. Just do it and figure out what works for you. Now, getting away from lifestyle, mental, emotional, obviously there could be drivers of chronic stress that are contributing to these dysfunctional patterns. Whether it is the one, the first example you want me to address, which is the elevated, or if it is the blunted. The blunted, of course, is more of a sign that you're in what we used to call stage 3 adrenal exhaustion.
Yeah.
Where you're just slumped. But I can tell you that you can still have quote unquote healthy cortisol levels, a healthy production of cortisol, and still have a blunted CAR, blunted cortisol awakening response. That's really important to understand. The cortisol awakening response is telling us how your HPA axis, how resilient it is, how well it manages challenges. It doesn't necessarily concern itself with the level of cortisol output. But anyhow, to go back to my point, inflammation, huge, huge, huge. In fact, most of the research that has been done on the drivers of HPA axis dysfunction are based in inflammatory cascade. So of course we know that GI infections are a huge issue there. We also know that leaky gut is a contributor to HPA dysfunction. And why do we have leaky gut? Because the intestinal barrier has been eroded by, the classic examples I think most people can resonate with would be like gluten intolerance, lactose intolerance, these what should be healthy, crypts like
microvilli,
all this work, they get all crumpled up and they're trapping parasites.
Yeah, villus atrophy, absolutely.
So the basics apply. They really do. I think that no matter what data we have, or even if we don't have any data, right, to take my lab hat off and just be a regular guy, if you never did another lab test, you know that you need to do the right things to support your physiology and to return to homeostasis. Now, where lab testing comes in is when you want to measure your progress empirically, which is a beautiful thing. I mean, that's my favorite thing about lab testing, actually, is I'm not wondering if I'm getting better, and maybe it's just a subjective reference point that I have, and this is improved over here, so I feel better, so my perception is different of this. The lab tells you how it is, right?
Totally. And it's real.
And
It's there. You can put your finger on it, you can touch it, and then you can try some things and then come back 3-6 months later and see how you're doing and see a change, which is it makes it real, and it
yeah,
makes what you're doing, worth it.
yeah, it's like a it's a metric. It's a true, personal health metric that you can control. And for some reason, it just got me thinking about how some patients will end up doing dozens and dozens of tests before they and their team of helpers, the clinicians, have that aha moment. And that's where my heart really goes out to that people, because it's so stressful to get better, which in itself is not helping you get better. And then I also see people who benefit dramatically just by getting on like a hormone replacement program.
Yeah.
It just seems to turn things on, gives them the energy and the mental acuity to start seeing things a little more clearly. Like, wow, I bet I've had parasites all these years from that traveling I did in India, and we were drinking water out of the tap. Lo and behold, they go in and we find Cryptosporidium parvum on every single sample. Obviously the list goes on, and again, for those of you viewing this, definitely go to biohealthlab.com to the patient section, and you can download the book, Dr. Timon's book.
Yep.
And I think a lot of
stress crisis.
Right, chronic stress crisis. I think a lot of what we're talking about is addressed there in a really, direct and solid way, because there's all sorts of drivers.
I'll put the links and everything in the description here so people can easily access it. And I think you did a good job. I'm going to just summarize some of that. So we have physical, chemical, and emotional stress. The emotional stress stuff, the relationships and meditation and gratitude and appreciation, all those are very important. We have the physical stressors, which could be too much or too little exercise, chronic pain and such. And then we have the chemical stressors, which is these could be under the surface, and this is where it's great to have the labs to pick up maybe H. pylori or Cryptosporidium parvum, like you mentioned, or adrenal dysfunction, or heavy metals, or low thyroid, or even gluten sensitivity, right? And nutrient deficiencies, low stomach acid and enzymes. So all those things could be under the surface and could be a driving stressor. And just to summarize, on the higher side of the car, right, if we have the adrenals response and it pops up high and stays high, we could use maybe adaptogenic herbs,
Absolutely.
ashwagandha, etc., rhodiola, maybe certain ginsengs. We can use certain nutrients like GABA or L-theanine or magnesium or phosphatidylserine. On the low side, we may use more licorice. We may dial in pregnenolone and DHEA dosing according to your labs. We may use certain B vitamins, B5, pantothenic acid, thiamine, B6, P5P, all those really good nutrients. Is there anything you wanted to add from a physical supplement take home that we could add in there, Brian?
Well, certainly a well-rounded mineral supplement is key.
Yep.
Some targeted amino acids, which I know is affects everyone differently. I'm a huge fan of L-theanine. I take large doses of that, and it makes a huge difference. I take it with tyrosine.
Love that.
It's just it's a really neat synergy. But no, you actually nailed it with what you listed, because even in Dr. Gulliam's book, which consolidates most of the relevant research, what you listed is represented there.
I got that book right over here. I think I can see it. If I could almost reach it. But yeah, it's a great book, and I agree. He does put a lot of info on the pregnenolone steel, where it may not be that stolen building block per se. It may just be that the physiology is shifting, and the more catabolic you get from stress, the more hormones do tend to go down the stress side of it, but it may not be this building block phenomenon known as the pregnenolone steel. And we'll put some info below. I've done podcasts and videos on this topic, so we'll put those below too.
Okay, cool. And just to underscore one thing you mentioned, the adaptogens.
Yes.
They're phenomenal, and I wonder why more and more people aren't making that part of their daily regimen and prioritizing it, because it really is. You mentioned rhodiola, ashwagandha. It's key. It is the key. I noticed when I forgot to take mine. I mean, no exaggeration.
Totally.
Like
Totally.
I really am a believer in those products.
I think that's great. Now, looking at BioHealth, I know you mentioned a couple other tracks that you guys were on here. You were talking about doing some adding some more thyroid lab testing. Can you talk about some of the thyroid lab tests you guys are adding to your protocol?
I can and I can't,
Okay.
to tell you the truth, because there's a lot of research and development happening right now.
Yeah.
And what I will tease you with this: what BioHealth is aiming to offer the most comprehensive thyroid panel at the best price, and you won't need a needle in your arm.
Does it beat the ZRT one? I'm using the ZRT for my patients that can't get to a LabCorp Quest lab. So, similar to that?
It's in the same category.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
How much longer you think?
let's leave it at that.
End of the
Well,
year?
it's taking time. We've done a lot of the important work, just working with Serum. Now there's more R&D that's necessary with these proprietary devices to get to the point where we're ready to go. But it's really going to be revolutionary. We're also going to be applying this technology to everything from hormones to food allergies, heavy metals. It's really exciting, but given the nature of its status, I really can't talk more on it.
Got it. Well,
I'll be
I got a thyroid book coming out, so make sure you hit me up so we can put it in there in the appendices for a resource. I love it.
Yeah, beautiful. When we've got it, you're going to hear all about it. I'm being mysterious right now, but it'll be a different game when we've got it out there.
That's great. Now, there are some other adrenal tests that are out too. Now, I've been using the 201 and the 205, I'd say probably for 7 or 8 years. I've been using the Dutch a little bit more recently, and I'm looking to come back using more of the car testing just because of its unique 0, 30-minute, 60-minute protocol there. And I think the salivary testing is great to do midday when people are at work, because some of the Dutch testing or the precision analytics labs where they're doing the dried urine, it's hard to do that middle of the day when you're at work, putting some paper that you pee on and letting it dry. What's your take on the dried urine testing, comprehensive hormone testing that's out by Precision Analytics? Any thoughts on that?
Well, we do have thoughts on it. We actually have a paper on our website where we have a series of papers. If you're on biohealthlab.com and you go to the HPA stress profile section, you will find a few papers on that right margin where we compare saliva to serum, to wet urine, and to dried urine. And when we engaged a couple PhDs to help us with this, they didn't want to do anything on dried urine because they said there's just no science to support that it's valid in any way, shape, or form. And there, in all fairness, there is no peer-reviewed literature in existence that supports dried urine testing. But we try to be very open-minded. Sure, it's a competitive industry, but I'm not really that worried about competition. My life is not about being worried about competition. I've got more interesting things to do. But we did take the time to write a paper, and what was interesting about it is if you look at the 3 papers, the serum comparison and the wet urine, I think they're like 2 to 3 pages. The one that compares dried urine is like 12. And that's because the people we engaged got pretty passionate about the topic. And I think the paper probably speaks best for itself. It'll be interesting to see what happens with dried urine testing in the future. The main, as I said earlier, we're always interested in continuous improvement. We're always very excited to see things getting better. But it has to be based in science.
Now, the benefit.
You have to have proof that from all the way from the kit, the material that's used, the stability, all the way to how it's reported, and certainly the claims being made about the physiological clinical relevance. All of that has to be based in science. And what I would suggest is, take a look at the paper that we produced and in that context. And unfortunately, the people who worked on these papers, who are some of the household names in like hormone research, refused to put their names on it because they felt that there was a conflict because they're researchers and we're commercial.
Totally.
So the paper would certainly have more impact if some of these names were on there because they are well-known individuals. But it is what it is, and people should just look at the references that we've cited and really ask themselves, is this accurate?
Well, I appreciate you giving me that perspective. I've used both labs, so I appreciate both sides of it. I mean, the benefit with the saliva, it's easy, it's accessible. You get access to the free fraction of the hormone, which typically represents about 2 to 5% of the hormone. The difference with the urine, you can get the free, you can get the total, the other 95 to 98%. You can get in via the metabolite form. And again, that's where some of the discrepancy is the urinary metabolites. Can you backtrack it and get the free testosterone equivalents from that? Is that the big discrepancy with the urine versus the saliva?
Well, the information is there's a lot of information there. Mm-hmm. But what is the real clinical value? What are you going to do differently if you know it? And every time I ask a clinician that, there's a bit of head scratching. And if we're just creating more of a mystery, I'm not sure we're helping the patient. But I would go back to basics. The collection device itself, mm-hmm. the normalization of creatine or creatinine, excuse me. We reference numerous studies that point out the weakness of the materials that are being used, the collection times, the value clinically, and there's very specific studies that target, this idea of urine on filter paper and how you would end up normalizing the creatinine. Again, I definitely want to check out that paper because it breaks down a lot of detail. There's a lot of conflicting issues there.
Well, I think you've given us some really good info so far. I'm going to reference those studies in the description below, so people want to get into the nitty-gritty, they can. That's excellent.
Absolutely.
So, Brian, is there anything else you wanted to address here today before I let you go?
Well,
anything really important you want to address?
I could obviously just rattle on about our lab test, but I think we've done enough of that. The only thing that comes to mind is how important it is, because I realize that most of the people watching your podcast are people that are, not health professionals. I know you have a lot of health professionals who follow what you do, but the majority are what we would call patients in our universe.
Exactly. Yeah.
People that are trying to feel better, trying to seek help. And as much as for 20 years I've been, in this business of lab testing, dietary supplements, a lot of science, quality assurance, quality control, everything that comes with it. And I've seen everything from the most highly sophisticated TED Talks on mitochondria regeneration to how meditation helps migraine headaches and everything in between. You used a word in this call that I think is worth a fortune, and that's gratitude.
Yeah.
I've met people around the world who suffer so dearly in their life situations because of where they are, the situation they're in. But the smile on the face, putting the stranger first, conveying love and all their energy, it's so phenomenally powerful to our health, physically, mentally, spiritually. It's untouched. We can talk about dried urine all day long. We could talk about, cryptosporidium. But I'll tell you what, if you don't start your day and finish your day with gratitude, and I'm certainly not the first to say this, my gosh. I mean, Gandhi, Tony Robbins, one thing many people have had in common is getting back to this point. It is amazing stuff, especially if you do some of the Tony Robbins tricks, like the purposeful walking and
huge.
And talking out, verbalizing your gratitude.
Yeah, visual.
Completely transform your consciousness and elevate it. And It's good stuff. So anyhow,
I think so.
You asked me what's important, and I couldn't think of anything more important in the moment.
And it's amazing, because you guys being a lab and a hormone company, right? Looking at all these hormones, but it's amazing how your hormones and your neurotransmitters get affected by just something simple as an attitude of gratitude. So I think it's profound.
Yeah, let's not forget what programs the hypothalamus. Thoughts.
Yep.
Attitudes.
Which affects dopamine and GABA and serotonin, all those things. Just a random act of kindness. Just by doing something random for someone, you actually boost their serotonin, you boost your serotonin. And anyone that actually watched the act happen, their serotonin gets boosted too. So yeah, you can do all these really cool things and fix your hormones and neurotransmitters naturally. At least give it a good boost for sure. That's great.
It's powerful.
So last question for you here, Brian. If you're stuck on a desert island and you only can bring one supplement, one herb, one nutrient with you, what would it be?
I normally go with first thought, best thought, but I really had to go down the rabbit hole on that one. I'm stuck on a desert island. I would. We actually have a product called Adaptoline.
Oh.
And it's a adaptogen formula. We talked about adaptogens earlier. I think there's something magical. I'm a huge fan of ashwagandha. In fact, if I could only have one botanical, that's what it would be.
Love ashwagandha. Indian ginseng, it means Sanskrit for to impart the strength of the horse. I mean, how fitting is that, right?
Yeah.
Awesome, Brian. Well, website is biohealthlabs.com. Is that correct?
No S, just biohealthlab.com. Mm-hmm.
Biohealthlab.com. The supplement side, Biomatrix 1.
Biomatrix 1, either the number or ONE.
Perfect. And we'll put all the notes and the descriptions and the references on the transcription side. Anything else here, Brian, before I let you go?
No, I just want to thank you. Love you as a friend, and you're a great client as well. And just keep up the good work, man. And thanks for having me.
Thanks so much, Brian, for this great information. Have a great day.
You too.
Got a question for Dr. J? Go to BeyondWellnessRadio.com and click the questions button. Then tune in to hear the answer. Also, if you like the show, click below to review us on iTunes. For more Beyond Wellness Radio, go to BeyondWellnessRadio.com.